Hi, I'm Feroz Khan, and welcome to Drag and Drop Low Code Unplugged, the podcast where we explore the game changing impact of low code in software development. Join me in insightful conversations with IT leaders and passionate low code enthusiasts who are at the forefront of this digital evolution. Together, we'll explore how early adoption of low code is giving businesses a competitive edge on a global scale. We'll discuss its impact on software development, dissect its role in transforming businesses, and uncover the ways in which it's reshaping career trajectories. So whether you're a seasoned IT professional or a curious enthusiast, be sure to tune in as we share success stories and unravel the mysteries of low code. Subscribe now and stay tuned for a front row seat to the revolution that's shaping the future of technology. So let's go. Hi Neil, how are you?
Hey, Feroz, doing good.
Pleasure to have you on. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest.
And thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Amazing, amazing. You know, obviously I know you pretty well because we've worked previously, but it'd be good to kind of, for you to give a bit of introduction about yourself, who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Hones. I'm currently a staff engineer at Paradigm Solutions. I've been working with Mendix since 2017, so right out of school. Um, I actually didn't study, you know, machine science or, computer science.
Mm.
So I studied industrial engineering at Northeastern in Boston. And then my last year, kind of trying to figure out how I was going to avoid moving home. I
Yeah,
had a friend from the club rugby team reach out and say, "Hey, I'm working with this really small consultancy. It's about 7 of us. We're working with this new technology. You don't need to, you don't need to know any programming language. A little bit of database, design is really helpful. But essentially, we'll show you the ropes. We think you're,
mm,
smart enough guy to be able to pick it up quickly.
yeah,
And then, it's kind of up to you. The first kind of 3 to 6 months is going to be a bit of a feeling out period. See how you
mm,
adjust, how you're picking it up, if you enjoy it, and that sort of thing. And then, from there, we'll kind of see how it goes. And so, I was really lucky in the way I was introduced to Mendix. Kind of got introduced with, a team of people, um, supporting me in trying to learn, knowing that, I had a long ways to go, but also kind of putting me on the fast track. So
mm,
there's no kind of easy way to, um, you know, avoid work or avoid
yeah,
responsibility or not put my code in front of people that are doing what I do at a higher level.
yeah,
So that was kind of my introduction to Mendix. And then from there I've taken on a couple of different roles. I worked at EXP Realty for 5 years
yeah,
on their engineering team. And then after that I joined Avertra and worked there for close to 6 months. Time difference and other things didn't quite work out, but
mm,
really enjoyed my time over there and working with those great people. And then my new role actually came after kind of taking a short break away from Mendix. So there was a point last year where um, I decided to go full time into playing poker professionally. So it's always something that I've enjoyed and
yeah,
done as a hobby or a thing on the side. Um, and for me personally, it was always something that I wanted to give it a full go.
yeah,
So go 100%. See what the life was like,
yeah,
and essentially, um, you think the grass is always greener,
yeah, yeah,
and while I had a lot of fun and had a lot of free time, I think there was some lack of structure, kind of a
yeah,
um, lack of growth, a lot of
mm,
satisfaction of what I was achieving or
yeah,
accomplishing. So I knew I had a decent foundation of Mendix to kind of fall back on, and that's what I ended up doing. And kind of getting back into the swing of things with Mendix, I took on a freelance role And so I was looking at jobs, in the US or outside, and that's kind of where I got introduced to you and your team,
Yeah.
and got, the chance to work with you guys on an opportunity in Korea. So that was really great. And then that kind of helped me kind of reintroduce myself to some old coworkers, and join the team here at Paradigm. So hope that wasn't too long-winded,
No, good.
but
Amazing.
that's kind of me and Mendix boiled down.
Yeah. And when you started that first role working with Mendix, was that company themselves new to Mendix, or were they already kind of, because this is 2017 and I don't think Mendix were that big in the US in 2017. So was that team already working with it for a while, or was it kind of you're all on a similar journey of learning this new platform?
So the team had been, excuse me, the team had been working with Mendix, I want to say, for a year and a half,
Okay.
maybe a year. Um, so, while they weren't quite experts, but they were
Hmm.
definitely, right now in the intermediate to,
Yeah.
advanced level with it. It was quite lucky I was in Boston, because that's where Mendix had kind
Yeah.
of started planning the move
Yeah.
to. So there was, people around that were nearby or had the corporate office. So um, at the time, I think our CEO of that small consulting company had some connections with the people in the professional services side of Mendix,
Yeah.
and they were one of the early partners to help with implementation.
Yeah. And what was the, those people were kind of, you said, kind of intermediate plus level, your experience itself, learning the platform, obviously not having that technology background, talk me through that process of how, how fast do you think you were able to learn it where you were kind of confidently independent? Because obviously low code, there's a big conversation about citizen development and people from any background can pick up low code. I think more and more these days, players like Mendix and OutSystems may be less favored to citizen development, but still favorable. What was that kind of learning process for you, and how quick did you kind of feel confident?
Yeah. For me, I guess feeling confident was, I mean, it's all relative, right? But for
Yeah,
me, it was being able to problem solve on my own, right? So
yeah,
having the confidence to run into an issue where maybe, I haven't solved it before,
oh,
but your first instinct is where to look, um, and not to reach out to someone more experienced or your manager to kind of help
oh,
you know boil it down. So to get there, I would say it took about 3 months of shadowing, where I'm really just trying to understand the way to think. So I had a few classes on database design, but you know, really understanding the data relationships. So, um, just trying to figure out how data is associated to each other, how it's stored in the association tables, or how things are retrieved or passed. Just the way of thinking of looking at your inputs and your outputs, and kind of isolating processes that way. Being an industrial engineer is kind of a systems process engineering. So I think, I was lucky in that that way of thinking wasn't completely green or new to me. Um, so once I kind of spent the first 3 months trying to switch the way you think a bit. The next 3 months were kind of partner coding. So
yeah,
while I would go over the design or the architecture of the solution with someone more experienced, the execution was on me.
yeah,
And so the good thing about that is you you have the confidence in knowing that what you're going to build or what you're trying to build will work once you kind of figure it out. But the execution of what you're building, you're going to miss all the best practices in that kind of
mm,
second 3 months phase.
yeah,
But it's really important to kind of go through that, well, I feel, and make those mistakes,
mm,
because if you're there partner coding with someone, and you know anytime you're dragging onto your screen and you're getting corrected, right? If you're not the one who's gone and made that mistake and had to go back and fix it,
yeah,
um, for me, it just doesn't quite stick as well. So the code reviews moved from you know, throughout the entire process to purely at the end. And so any of the rework, any of that sort of thing, is on me to fix. And we go through the best practices, and that's kind of how I was able to learn very quickly, right? Um, and then I would say the next 6 months it was a bit of me being thrown into the fire. So, you know,
Oh,
ended up being, a lead dev on a project, a very big project,
yeah,
and you just kind of have to be able to roll with the punches and figure it out. So you don't really know if you're going to enjoy it or um, do well until you're kind of in there. But for me, a lot of it came down to bringing back, problem solving skills, working
oh,
with people, and then the last piece for me was the technology side
yeah.
actually um, started to come a little bit more naturally in those last months there.
And I think the point you said about correcting your own mistakes, I think is definitely good advice, because I think it's the saying of learn from your mistakes, right? And then when you're going forward, if you see that again, actually the last time I did that was incorrect. So you kind of learn and progress, and that's how you can grow in your career. From a junior to senior, and someone with no tech background to kind of now working, and you being thrown in the deep end on a project is from obviously learning those experiences.
Yeah. And I mean, knowing what not to do sometimes
Oh,
is just as important as knowing,
yeah,
what to do, right?
yeah,
So things to avoid. And unless you're the one there writing it and having to go back and fix it, um, it, it just doesn't stick, right?
yeah. And working with the platform for quite a while now, Mendix is regularly updating features in the platform, kind of to enhance it and make it better. Obviously at the moment there's a lot of talk about AI and things like that, but in the early days or even more recently, as someone who was using it, were there certain features, what would you say were some of the kind of game changing features that come in the platform that, when it came out, you thought this is going to make my job much easier?
Recently, what I'm been excited to kind of use more often is the view entities. So I think that's you know for reporting modules, those types of view entities are might become the norm. Being able to pull that data and build your own queries within there, I think is going to be uh, much cleaner. Um, and it's kind of been a little bit of a, I don't want to say a weakness of Mendix, but reporting on really large data sets for any cloud-based web application is usually not the easiest or its strength.
Huh.
So that's something I'm excited for. But when I was first starting out, to me the Mendix marketplace was everything.
Yeah,
It took someone who I had always kind of looked at building apps and software development as this extremely specialized skill, and here I am, just almost like I'm just in a normal iOS app store,
yeah,
and I can just grab someone's widget, someone's tool, and you know do a little bit of rework on styling or maybe change one small
yeah,
thing, and be able to present it not quite as my own, but essentially, right?
yeah,
So for me, um, just being able to kind of lean on the overall intelligence of the community, right? Like
yeah,
um, that kind of boost, I think, was the first thing that I realized. Well, you know, maybe it is possible for someone without the background and
oh,
all the technical knowledge to be able to code some of these widgets behind the scenes, um, to really thrive with Mendix still.
yeah. And then, do you find as someone who, yeah, didn't kind of come from that tech background, some people are kind of part of networks or have conversations with people who you might be in a room with people who are hardcore tech people, and they kind of put their nose up at low code people. Have you ever had that type of instance or example where you might be in a meeting presenting and the other person just thinks they know more than you because, they think they've got more experience?
Yeah, I mean, in general, kind of a lot of the people that look down at low code or Mendix are the people that are knowledgeable on some of the, high code
Yeah.
programming languages, right? Um, but, you know, they look at it in a space where they're competing. I don't really look at them as
Yeah.
competitors. It, it's to me, it's a different space. And sure, there's lots of things you can do with other languages that, um, might be more technically impressive, or you might be able to do something more groundbreaking if your IP is your technology, and your application is how your company makes money. Then yeah, you may not build it in Mendix, right?
Yeah.
But um, that's not really the market, right? So there's kind of a misunderstanding in that they think we're trying to make Mendix take over everything,
Yeah.
and it doesn't need to, right? For it to
Yeah.
have an impact and be around for a while. Um, the things it does really well is, development speed, um, being readable to people outside of the engineering team, so being readable to the business, and then, building out proofs of concepts, drag and drop. It's really just to digitize custom processes for business. It's not to, um, you know, impress the next people at, Google or Facebook with the
Yeah.
new groundbreaking technology, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And as great as the platform is, and you touched on it earlier, all platforms have frustrations. Nothing's perfect. Is there anything that the platform doesn't offer, that you'd like to see in the future, which is a current frustration?
Hmm. Um, I think it's getting there. I mean, I want to kind of touch on the AI piece a little bit. I know
Yep,
we're gonna get
yep,
there eventually.
yeah,
Uh, so off the top of my head, like, no, there's nothing extremely
yeah,
specific. I mean, there's some features within, maybe the unit testing module,
mm,
or, um, some other, small pieces or add-ons or extensions that would be great. That'd be nice. But there's nothing, glaring as a red flag of, oh man, we're missing
yeah,
this crucial piece. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, we'll see what the AI will be able to do, but
yeah.
that's
Well,
kind of
that's my next question, right? Obviously
okay.
AI kind of is, let's say, the last 2 years on everyone's kind of, tip of the tongue. Everyone's talking about it. Obviously, all the low code players have invested in kind of making sure low code plus AI is the solution, rather than there's also been conversations where will low code, not be needed with the introduction of AI. So I'm interested to know your personal thoughts on that. If, AI obviously enhances low code, or you see a future of AI replacing low code.
Yeah, I don't see it as a full replace, especially, you know, um, especially with the Mendix modeler. There's kind of an extra medium, if we're trying to build, especially Mendix with AI, that it kind of has to translate to, right? So it's got to build an MPK file, and then you've got to import this stuff. And I think AI will be the executor maybe, but I don't think there's going to be trust in AI to design solutions at all, right? So um, Mendix has already taken some of the steps which AI is doing now, which is
Yeah,
um, taking a lot of the medial tasks out of development, right? So um, things that we can drag and drop, is very similar to what AI will just quickly build for you, right?
yeah,
So Mendix and the modeler already is accomplishing what AI is accomplishing for other languages, and
yeah,
it did it, years ago, right? Um, but for someone that's already experienced that, knows the risk of having someone that doesn't know your application jump in and start building. Um, for someone like me, that trade-off doesn't work, right?
yeah,
Um, I know that risk isn't worth the very small amount of time it's going to save me and the modeler doing, the same amount of clicks and verification. And at the same time, even if you do have something built out with AI, there's got to be a verification step, right? Where someone with the experience who knows what they're looking for goes in and checks, how did it build it? Did it build it how I intended with the script? Um, and if not, how do I fix it? Right? Um, and so I don't know. I'm kind of caught in the middle where I know it's inevitable,
Yeah.
um, but I think we've got more time than a lot of people say we do.
Yeah.
Um, and especially with low code, I also don't know where Maya or low
Yeah.
code AIs are going to learn from, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's not like there's generic people, out there all building their own personal Mendix app feeding,
Yeah.
a search engine information. Uh, so if it's collecting Mendix from, I don't know, private projects or people that agree to it, in the modeler, I'm not really sure how much of that they're going to know what is good code, what is bad code,
Yeah.
what to recommend. So there's little things now which are really useful, best practice recommendations, and those
Yeah.
just kind of help you avoid the silly mistakes.
Yeah.
So it saves you a little bit of time here and there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't save enough time yet for the risk it introduces, but
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And you touched on Maya. What's your views on Maya, and are you kind of using it in your day to day at the moment? Or not so much?
Not so much. I think if I was doing a, proof of concept or just, wanted to show someone really quick, um, how I could build something out in Mendix in a very short amount of time, then sure, I would have no problem doing that. But for, an existing enterprise application that's on production, um, I think we've tried asking it just a couple of prompts and seeing how it would do, and you know reworking what it produced would have taken about the same amount of time as creating it ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's not quite there yet. And so we'll keep testing it, keep feeding it, but
Yeah.
um, for the time being, if you're already in production or working on a pretty decently sized level project, I don't think it's reliable enough yet,
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. And
unfortunately.
obviously you kind of talking about even though you came into Mendex with no skills, there's a lot of transferable skills from what you've done. And being in the US, and the US market community has grown, but I'd say it's still very small, of developers. So what advice would you give companies, looking to kind of build their own teams of developers when there's a lack of experienced developers around? What advice would you give companies when they're going out to build their own teams when looking at talent?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I would say, it really helps to have a balance of people that come from a high code background and people that don't. Um, a lot of the times, you'll find the people skills or social skills between the two may differ.
Mm.
Maybe not. That's kind of me being a bit stereotypical. But there is kind of a like in my experience, the people that come from the high code background, that's kind of their first instinct, right? So if
Yeah.
something quickly out of the box with Mendix doesn't work, okay, well, I'll just code this in Java action. We'll
Yeah.
be just done with it and move on, right? But then if the next person comes in isn't a high coder and they've got an issue with this Java action, um, now you're a bit stuck in the mud, right? So it's almost less risky to have the person who only knows Mendix and is going to
Yeah.
implement stuff that's readable, reusable, maintainable for the next guy, than it is to introduce potentially complexity where you don't need it. So it's really good to kind of have that balance. And then I would say if you're building out a team, um, you definitely want a solution architect, right? So yes, having an expert level developer is extremely important. But having someone who can understand the big picture of and ask the right questions of the business and the stakeholders, how they plan to use the Mendix applications, how many users, what do they see this ecosystem of applications looking like in 5 years, in 10 years, that sort of thing. So you know, putting your best foot forward early. So bringing in the experienced guys, building out a
Yeah.
really strong foundation, balancing out your team. So having high code as well as people that only know low code. Um, I think those would be the biggest things. And then my recommendation is start out small, right? So start off with an application that isn't mission critical to your
Yeah.
operations, especially if your
Mm.
team is new and trying to figure out the best way to do things. Um, you don't want to find out the best way to do things with your mission critical main
Yeah,
application,
yeah, of
right?
course. Yeah.
Especially if you're setting it up for multiple applications or microservices, there's certain things that you're going to reuse everywhere. So if you can figure out those details or those modules that are going to be in almost all of your company's applications in a microservice or something that's not client facing or facing your entire internal company, um, I think the overall reception and you know the feelings towards Mendix are going to start off higher and only grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And you spoke about you kind of took a break and went out to play some poker, and can you talk me through that experience? Or because obviously there's people who change careers all the time. They might have a passion for something where they think, what, I'd love to try this full time.
Yeah.
So talk me through that experience of you touched on it earlier, but obviously you missed what you were doing as a Mendex kind of developer. But can you talk me through how was it? It's not every day you speak to someone who's left a tech career to kind of go play poker.
Yeah. So poker was something I just started playing with, my roommates and friends in
Yeah,
college. And then when I eventually moved back to the Seattle area, uh, I there was a what's it called? There is a Native American like casino near me, and so
yeah,
you know I was kind of living out in the boonies, like an hour away from Seattle for a
yeah,
good 3 to 6 months, and so that was kind of what I was doing
yeah,
for that amount of time. And so I kind of learned the game. Um, you pay for your mistakes,
yeah,
and once
yeah,
you pay for them, you ideally learn from them. But
yeah,
there's a cost to learn. And it was always something I did on the side. Eventually, I've been working remote for a while, so I've been moving
mm,
to different cities, mostly
yeah,
on the West Coast, and I ended up here in Las Vegas. But actually, the majority of the poker I was playing going into this or leading up to me, trying to pursue it professionally,
mm.
was online.
Okay,
So it was kind of an online bit of a private kind of game. Um, and I was playing 4 or 5 card poker. So for those
yeah,
that know, it's called Pot Limit Omaha or PLO. So I was playing PLO and PLO 5, um, and the games got really good. So
mm.
it got to the point where I was making decent money playing poker, and I was just kind of thinking, well, if I gave this a proper shot, if
Yeah,
this had all my time and energy, then wouldn't this number go up?
yeah, of
Right?
course,
Just
yeah, yeah, of
and
course,
it's kind of the naive kind of
yeah,
thought, right? And so, um, I went for it, and I always kind of wanted to know, hey, what's that life like?
yeah,
And what I found was it doesn't introduce a lot of structure into your life. And um, that was something I found out was good for me. I
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then at the same time, I felt like I wasn't really going anywhere. So,
Mm.
I'm not contributing anything to society.
Uh,
I'm essentially taking money from, other people that really don't
yeah.
need it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's just kind of this really interesting dynamic of being a poker player or especially professional,
Yeah.
where you have to cultivate these relationships where you're playing with non-professionals and they know you're a professional and they know you're a winning player, but they're still happy to play with you anyways.
Uh,
So you've got to win, but not win too much.
yeah.
You got to, essentially keep your customers happy to pay you, and
Yeah.
it's really odd. It's really funny. But at the end of the day, what I realized was I can take, if that's your only source of income,
Mm.
um, and the stakes that I was playing were getting higher in a bit, it's stressful, and there's
Yeah, I
a
can
high
imagine.
level of variance, right? And overall, I just kind of weighed my options. I was like, it really doesn't need to be a full-time thing, and
Yeah.
it wasn't healthy for me personally for it to be full-time. Um, so now it's something I'll go and play on the weekends or that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I went and I found out, right? Like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
now, like I don't look at poker as like, oh yeah, well when
Yeah.
I make it, that's what I'm gonna do
Yeah.
professionally. Like
Yeah.
I know
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
what that
Yeah.
life's like, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's really it's really not glamorous.
Yeah.
The amount of time those guys just spend at a casino sitting around,
Yeah.
people that maybe aren't in the best mood or
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sort of thing, right? Like the amount of time, it's not what a lot of people picture.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I guess the good
uh,
thing is that, it's something that you were passionate about, and now at least you won't have that what if, right? You've done it, and
yeah,
you can say, look, I tried it, and I've realized I don't want to do it. So where a lot of people might be hesitant to do something like that and forever think, oh, what if I wish I followed that passion, or and never kind of do it. So I guess it's good that you at least tried it out and you've seen that it's actually not all it seems from the outside.
right, right. And I gave myself a year, right? So
Yeah.
all my friends were joking and like, oh, all the money's run out, you know. And I was like, oh, it's not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I'm not loving the life. And they're like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Like, you don't have a job? Like, you just go
Yeah.
play cards? I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, but they don't see the really tough
Yeah. Of
side of
course.
of
Yeah.
doing everything right, because
Yeah.
you can do everything right and get your money in good, and then at the end of the day, it's poker. So
Yeah.
by that
Yeah.
I mean the last card can change everything,
Yeah. Of course.
and you can
Yeah.
do everything right and still lose, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that was the big thing you mentioned. There is no what if, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then within that year, I knew I could come back to something that I've invested a ton of time on,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not be not have missed out on too much,
Yeah.
still have some connections.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I was very lucky. The
Yeah.
people I met at EXP, Virtual,
Yeah.
really everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it is really a community.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned this earlier in the US, kind of how small the Mendix community
Yeah.
is. And, when I did take that year off and when I was jumping back in, I think almost every single opportunity that I interviewed for or
Huh.
got, or really anyone that reached out to me, was someone that I had previously worked for,
Worked with. Yeah.
was a manager somewhere,
Yeah.
or they worked very closely with a consultant that I worked
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So it was all oh, know of them and know of them,
Yeah.
and he's gonna ask his friend who worked with me,
Yeah. Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
any good, or am
Yeah.
I, not worth his time,
Yeah.
that sort of
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
So it is actually much closer, much more connected than people may think.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when Daryl mentioned you to me, when we kind of got your resume. He said, I've got a really good guy. And I said, oh, where's he working? And he said, oh, he's been playing poker for the last year. I was like, what? You know? And he goes, oh, but the client we're dealing with, they know him from EXP, so it's fine. You know, they'll all know each other. And I'm glad kind of it all worked out really well. You know, that, you know, the timing of us reaching out to you and you kind of coming back into kind of the flow of things was really good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, again, very lucky that, you know, on my way trying to make it back into Mendix, I was able to lean on, you know, some really great people that I built trust with over the years,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
that's one of the biggest things is um, when you're getting mentored intentionally, unintentionally, you know, just building their trust
yeah,
is just massive.
yeah,
And, you know, they're gonna end up you're gonna end up running into, you know,
yeah,
some of
yeah,
these
yeah,
Mendix
yeah,
guys sooner
yeah.
rather than later. So those relationships are really big.
Yeah, I truly believe that, you know, whoever you deal with, you will come across again. You know, it's always important to make those relationships kind of be positive because you just never know, you know,
Uh-huh.
when someone below you could now be a manager going forward, or, you know, just when you're looking for an opportunity, not even just in the US, you know, like the guys in Netherlands knew you, right? Because of that. So it's
Right.
truly a global community where even though there's so many people in it, you know, if you make the right connections, it can kind of help you, you know, get by kind of quite easily when, you know, not really in need, but when kind of, you know, looking for things, there's enough people to help you around.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, just the way you treat people, I mean,
Yeah,
just really matters, right? And it's
yeah,
not um and a lot of times the technical side, yes, it's important,
mm,
like what you know, but um one of the biggest things I think that helped me land one of my the freelance role that,
yeah,
you know, we worked together on
yeah,
was just knowing, you know, the type of person I am. Am I able
yeah,
to communicate with a brand new team? Do I have the
yeah,
confidence to speak up if maybe, you know, there's a language barrier,
yeah,
working through issues, you know, how am I to work with, right? At the
yeah,
end of the day, you're spending hours a day working with someone, you know, if if you really don't enjoy working with them, they better be an all-star, right? Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
they better be unreplaceable. They better be
yeah,
that guy who knows how the system works and no one else
yeah,
knows, because if they're not, it's not worth it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's just not.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, speaking about that experience, you know, can you talk me through that experience in Korea? What it was like? Obviously, you used to working in the American culture, and you know, you've now dived back into Mendix, then you've flown, you know, to Korea to kind of do this project. You know, what was the experience like, and also the difference in working culture?
Yeah. So for me, it was 3 months. So I'll just kind of go through the project scope.
Yeah,
It was 3 months in Suwon, South Korea. I was working alongside Siemens for their partner Samsung. It's a couple of applications. Started off as a proof of concept, and then we kind of built the early stages of just a couple apps for them. Um, to me, it was a bit like Mendix boot camp. It was
okay, yeah,
I take my year off. You know,
yeah,
I've been working from home for 4+ years,
yeah,
and so um, all of this was on site due to
uh,
security issues, or not issues, security protocols.
yeah,
And you know, you're there, you know, 9, 10 hours a day, and you're there with your team, right? Like, that was the thing that I kind of appreciated, is there's kind of a team solidarity, at least
uh,
amongst the development team I was there with. Early on, we had some tough sprints, some tough deadlines, and kind of the team that I joined in South Korea. If you've got to stay late and really grind through, like, they'll do anything they can to help,
yeah,
you know, make that time shorter.
yeah.
Um, and you know, you kind of got to push them out the door if there's nothing they can do, just because,
Okay,
you know, you're like, hey, no, like,
yeah,
please go home. Like, there's truly, like, uh, there's nothing you can help me here with. Like, I
Yeah.
know you feel bad that I've got to stay, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was 3 months of kind of intense back to Mendix. So
Mm.
um, there was a few members of the team that had over a year of Mendix experience.
Mm.
One very senior person from the Siemens side. So we were lucky in having him on the project, as there was a Team Center extension,
Yeah.
which I had never worked with, and to
Mm.
me it was kind of a like this black box of
Yeah.
just. I mean, if you look at that module, it is busy
Mm.
to say the least, right? So we were very lucky in having him, and then there was one developer on the team who did speak very good English, who was essentially, my go-to guy.
Yeah.
Um, but culture-wise, maybe it was just the project I was on. So,
Mm.
I'm pretty hesitant to speak on, generalization
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the work
Sure.
culture or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the team I was on, the developers and the people making business decisions on how the app should behave were extremely separate. So there
Mm.
was at least 2 to 3 degrees of separation, right? So there was um, the people from the Siemens side taking in this information, and then they had a local consulting partner manager who would then take that and then pass it down to myself and the developers.
Yeah.
So the possibility for dialogue between the engineers and the so-called designers or
Yeah.
decision makers just it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So that makes things really difficult, especially because not only were some of the devs new to Mendix, but of course the people making decisions are as well.
Mm.
So if they're not familiar with what Mendix does well, it doesn't do well, um, and that feedback loop isn't available,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you're stuck in a much more traditional development cycle, right? So um, it felt a little bit kind of like more of a waterfall project than
Yeah.
kind of agile. And then, especially on the UX UI side, just heavy customizations. So, I mean, that's not too uncommon, especially for UI.
Mm.
For UI, but there were some UX features that were, just locked in. It's this way or no way, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
that you've just kind of got to adjust that. Hey, there's no wiggle room with this
Mm.
client. They have their own person to design these pages, and we've literally just got to follow it to the T.
Yeah.
So, one tough part was getting PowerPoints of screenshots of designs, especially in a different language. So
Yeah.
you've got to translate, and then not all translators are equal, by the way.
Yeah. Of
Uh,
course. Yeah.
so yeah, there's some very, very confusing moments there, but it, I guess I felt much more grateful for um, the access engineers and developers have in the
Yeah.
US to
Yeah.
people at the top level and influence their
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah. Amazing. And talking about Mendix as a platform, and you personally, I've been asking this to everyone this season. If you kind of could build anything yourself, using the Mendix platform, what would that be?
That's a great question. Lately I've been kind of reading into and trying to dive into the Internet of Things, so the IoT,
Mm.
um, sensors and that sort of thing. My dad is a big farmer, and he's always trying to grow fruits and veggies and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So I've kind of been chatting with him about this idea of kind of having a Mendix starter app, but essentially creating modules that connect to maybe different types of, hardware sensors. So, you know, if people want to build their own setup, here's your starter app. Here's the microflows you need to be able to go and get that data and trigger an action with it. Um, and so the kind of application that I've been talking about with my dad just a little bit is um, essentially creating a library for the best way to grow things in an enclosed space, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got the sensor for humidity, for heat, for UV, or all
Mm.
these types of things, and you want to grow something that has no business growing where you live, if
Yeah.
you've got an enclosed thing and you've got these sensors to regulate all the
Yeah.
conditions, then all you need is the data from someone else who's done it before to say, no, you need to, the first week, this is the program, these are, the levels you need to have it. And then by week 10, here you go. Here's your
Yeah.
Guinness World Record
Yeah.
breaking
Yeah. That's cool.
carrot or whatnot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of what we've been thinking, but who knows? I don't know. Maybe that's not the next $1 billion app idea, but I'm keeping the other ones in the vault, Feroz.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
of course, of course. Good
keep the
idea. Yeah.
vault, keep
Yeah.
the
Don't
vault
share
for
them
me.
all.
But for right now, we'll throw out the fruits and veggies
Yeah,
builder.
yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right.
And finally, there's still, I touched on, the traditional developer thing. There's still a lot of skeptics for low code, even though now it's around everybody. Most people know of it. It's in all the analysts talk about it. What would be your message to the skeptics of today?
Well, I think the skeptics of today are, it kind of goes back to the high coders and kind of their expectation that, oh, it's going to replace. And
Yeah.
that's not the case, right? There's certain specializations where that language does that very well, and so it cannot be replaced in this space. And Mendix's space for that is digitizing, business processes, right? It's not for people trying to reinvent the wheel, but for the most part, there's still an astonishing amount of companies that are on Excel or, you
Yeah.
know, some form of that, right? Um, and replacing that requires a few things, or replacing that at good value requires a few things,
Mm.
right? So speed of development, and Mendix has kind of flattened the learning curve, or kind of the curve to be able to be a software engineer, right? So therefore, the skills required to build a Mendix app, or what you pay for those skills, is going to be slightly less, right? So it's going to
Mm.
be fast. It's going to be slightly cheaper on the workforce side, um, and it's extremely flexible, right? So you want to break things out into its own, modular little pieces, into microservices. You can do that, um, and so for that space, in what way is it going away, right? Like
Yeah.
that, unless that space somehow just gets completely swallowed by an AI which can
Yeah.
read the minds of our product owners,
Yeah.
um, which, you know, good luck to you, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's, I mean, that would be, I guess, the new job, right? Is
Yeah.
distilling stuff into prompts, but then you're essentially learning how to code a prompt, right?
Yeah.
So at some level, low code, it's just never, it's there's no, I don't see a way for it to be kind of kicked to the side or
Yeah.
eliminated. So that's where I'm at, but who knows? I've been wrong plenty of times before, right?
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Share your very interesting journey. I think it's cool that it's very different, because I've never had someone who's kind of gone away and come back again, and kind of talk about the learning experience of that and how that's kind of helped you forward, and even just the whole going doing a project abroad and then coming back and appreciating different things. So I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. Been really fun to kind of talk about my experience with Mendix, and kind of the weird journey it's been, kind of over
Yeah.
and back, and kind of bobbing and weaving. And I just kind of wanted to share that it doesn't really need to be this smooth linear
Yeah.
line. Yeah, you can kind of, you get out what you put in,
Yeah.
which has kind of been my main experience with Mendix. So
Amazing. Great, Neil. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Feroz. Take care.
Take care.